They told us family comes first. They preached about bloodline loyalty and Samoan tradition until we believed it was sacred, unbreakable, eternal. But what happens when that same family abandons you in your darkest hour? What happens when the very people who swore to have your back are nowhere to be found when you're fighting for your life in a hospital bed? Well, Jacob Fatu just exposed the biggest lie in WWE history, and what he discovered during his visit to see Roman Reigns will make you question everything you thought you knew about the bloodline, loyalty, and the cold-hearted business machine that WWE has become. Just 48 hours ago, shocking reports emerged that Roman Reigns had been rushed to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles following what WWE initially described as severe exhaustion and dehydration. But wrestling insiders know that's corporate speak for something far more serious. Sources close to the situation are whispering about internal injuries, potential career-threatening complications, and a WWE medical team that's been working around the clock to determine whether the tribal chief will even be cleared to compete at WrestlePalooza 2025. While the wrestling world held its collective breath waiting for updates on Roman's condition, one man made a decision that would expose the rot at the heart of sports entertainment's most powerful faction. Jacob Fatu, the monster enforcer who has stood by Roman's side through every battle, every betrayal, every moment of triumph and defeat, walked through those hospital doors expecting to find his cousin surrounded by the family that claims to define their very existence. What he found instead will haunt him forever. I walked into that room expecting to see Solo, Jimmy, G, Paul Heyman, hell, even some of the boys from the back, Fatu revealed in an exclusive interview that's already sending shockwaves through the wrestling industry. I thought I'd have to fight through a crowd of Bloodline members and WWE officials just to get close to Roman's bedside. Instead, I found him alone. Completely, utterly alone. The image Fatu painted is one that should terrify every wrestler who's ever trusted their career to WWE's corporate machine. Roman Reigns, the man who carried the company on his back for nearly a decade, the performer who drew millions of dollars in revenue and elevated WWE's stock price to unprecedented heights, lying in a hospital bed with nothing but the sterile hum of medical equipment for company. But the abandonment goes deeper than just absent family members. According to Fatu, Roman's hospital room told a story of systematic neglect that exposes WWE's true priorities. No flowers from the company, Fatu continued, his voice heavy with disgust. No get-well cards from the writers who've been booking his storylines for years. No visits from the executives who've been counting the money he's made them. Nothing. Just a man who gave everything to this business, laying there forgotten like yesterday's news. The timing of this abandonment couldn't be more calculated or cruel. WrestlePalooza 2025, WWE's biggest event of the year, is just weeks away. Roman was scheduled to defend his undisputed championship against Cody Rhodes in what was being promoted as the company's marquee attraction. With Roman's status now uncertain, WWE has been scrambling to restructure their entire event around his potential absence. But rather than rallying around their injured champion, rather than showing the loyalty they've preached for years, the Bloodline members have apparently scattered like roaches when the lights come on. Solo Sikoa, who owes his entire WWE career to Roman's guidance and protection, was reportedly seen at a Los Angeles nightclub the same night Roman was admitted to the hospital. Jimmy and GUSO, the twin brothers who built their legacy on Bloodline association, were photographed at a high-end restaurant, seemingly celebrating while their cousin fought for his health. That's when I realized it was all a lie. Fatu's voice cracked with emotion as he continued his devastating revelation. The whole Bloodline thing, the family-first mentality, the acknowledgement of the tribal chief, it was all just storyline bullshit. When Roman needed his family most, when he was vulnerable and scared and fighting through pain that would break lesser men, they were nowhere to be found. The betrayal cuts even deeper when you consider the sacrifices Roman has made for his so-called family over the years. He elevated Solo Sikoa from developmental obscurity to main event status. He rehabilitated the USO brothers' careers after multiple arrests and personal scandals that should have ended their WWE runs. He used his political influence to ensure Jacob Fatu received a hero's welcome when he finally signed with WWE, despite concerns about his controversial past. And this is how they repay him. But Fatu's visit revealed something even more disturbing than family abandonment. According to his account, Roman's medical situation is far more serious than WWE has publicly acknowledged. He wasn't just tired, Fatu explained, his hands shaking as he recalled the scene. This wasn't some publicity stunt or work to generate sympathy. Roman was hurt, really hurt, and he was scared. I could see it in his eyes, the fear that maybe this time, maybe he'd pushed his body too far. The implications of this revelation are staggering. If Roman's condition is as serious as Fatu suggests, WWE has been deliberately misleading the public, the investors, and the wrestling community about the health status of their biggest star. They've been promoting WrestlePalooza 2025 with Roman as the centerpiece while knowing full well that he might not be medically cleared to compete. They had him working through injuries that would sideline normal people for months, Fatu continued, his anger building with every word. Torn muscles, damaged joints, concussion symptoms that he was told to ignore because the show must go on. Roman never complained, never asked for time off, never put his own well-being ahead of the company's needs. And where did that loyalty get him? Alone in a hospital bed while his family parties and WWE executives count their money. This pattern of WWE prioritizing profit over performer safety isn't new, but Fatu's account provides the most damning insider perspective we've ever heard. He described a corporate culture where wrestlers are viewed as expendable assets, valuable only as long as they can generate revenue. The moment they become liabilities, the moment they need support rather than providing it, they're discarded like broken equipment. I sat next to Roman's bed for 6 hours, Fatu revealed. 6 hours where no one else came. No family, no friends, no executives, no writers. Just me and him, talking about life, about regrets, about what really matters when everything else gets stripped away. And you know what he told me? He said he finally understood why Dean Ambrose left. He said he finally realized that WWE doesn't love you, they love what you can do for them. The comparison to Dean Ambrose, now Jon Moxley in AEW, is particularly cutting. Moxley famously walked away from WWE despite being offered a substantial contract renewal, citing creative frustration and concerns about the company's treatment of performers. At the time, many viewed his departure as short-sighted, believing he was throwing away guaranteed money and mainstream exposure. But Fatu's account suggests that Roman, lying in that hospital bed, finally understood what Moxley saw years ago. He realized that WWE's loyalty is conditional, temporary, and ultimately meaningless when compared to the genuine human connections that transcend corporate interests. Roman started crying, Fatu continued, his own voice breaking with emotion. This mountain of a man, this warrior who's faced down every challenge WWE could throw at him, broke down and cried because he realized how alone he really was. Not alone in the business sense, alone in the human sense. Surrounded by people who only cared about him as long as he could make them money. The emotional weight of this moment cannot be overstated. Roman Reigns, the man who has been positioned as WWE's unshakable champion, reduced to tears by the realization that his professional relationships were ultimately hollow. It's a damning indictment of both the wrestling industry and the specific culture that WWE has cultivated around its top stars. But Fatu's revelations don't stop with emotional manipulation and family abandonment. He also provided disturbing details about WWE's response to Roman's hospitalization, painting a picture of a company more concerned with damage control than genuine care for their injured performer. Within hours of Roman being admitted, the WWE lawyers were there, Fatu explained. Not doctors, not executives checking on his well-being, lawyers. They were more interested in making sure Roman couldn't say anything that might damage the company's reputation than they were in his actual recovery. They had him sign papers while he was still medicated, still in pain, still trying to figure out what was wrong with his body. This revelation suggests that WWE was already preparing for potential legal liability related to Roman's condition, possibly indicating that they were aware their demanding schedule and pressure to perform through injuries had contributed to his hospitalization. The image of lawyers circling a hospital bed like vultures while an injured performer struggles with his health is perhaps the most disgusting aspect of Fatu's entire account. They made him promise not to talk to reporters, not to discuss his medical condition, not to say anything that might suggest WWE was responsible for his injuries, Fatu continued. They were protecting their brand while he was fighting for his health. That's when I knew I had to speak out, had to tell people what was really happening behind the corporate spin. Fatu's decision to break his silence represents enormous personal and professional risk. By revealing the truth about Roman's condition and WWE's response, he's likely violated non-disclosure agreements and corporate policies that could result in his immediate termination and potential legal action. But his willingness to speak out suggests that some things are more important than job security. I don't care what this costs me, Fatu declared. I don't care if WWE fires me tomorrow, if they sue me into bankruptcy, if they try to destroy my reputation. Roman is family, real family, not corporate family. And when your family is being abandoned and exploited, you speak up. You fight back. The contrast between Fatu's loyalty and the abandonment shown by other Bloodline members is stark and revealing. While Solo Sikoa, the Usos, and even Paul Heyman have maintained strategic silence to protect their own careers, Fatu has chosen to risk everything to expose the truth. His actions demonstrate what genuine loyalty looks like compared to the performative loyalty that defines WWE's version of the Bloodline. But perhaps the most explosive aspect of Fatu's revelations concerns WWE's contingency planning for WrestlePalooza 2025. According to his account, the company had been preparing for Roman's potential absence weeks before his hospitalization, suggesting they were aware of his declining health but continued to push him toward a breaking point. They already had backup plans, Fatu revealed. Multiple scenarios for WrestlePalooza if Roman couldn't compete. They knew he was struggling, knew his body was breaking down, but they kept demanding more. More appearances, more matches, more promotional events. They were squeezing every last drop of revenue out of him while he still had something left to give. This calculated exploitation of a performer's declining health represents corporate callousness at its worst. WWE apparently viewed Roman's inevitable breakdown not as a tragedy to prevent, but as a business challenge to manage. They were more interested in extracting maximum value from their asset than in preserving the human being behind the character. The medical details that Fatu shared paint an even more disturbing picture of Roman's condition. His hands were shaking, Fatu described. Not from fear, but from whatever was wrong with his body. He kept trying to sit up, trying to look strong even in a hospital bed, but you could see the pain shooting through him with every movement. This wasn't exhaustion, this was systematic breakdown. These symptoms suggest that Roman's condition may be related to the long-term effects of his previous battles with leukemia, combined with years of physical punishment in the ring and the stress of carrying WWE's main event scene. If true, it means that WWE has been pushing a performer who was already compromised by serious health issues, potentially endangering his life for the sake of corporate profits. The doctors were talking about career-ending possibilities, Fatu continued, his voice barely above a whisper. Not just missing WrestlePalooza, potentially never wrestling again. And when I heard that, when I realized that Roman might lose the only thing he's ever truly loved because WWE worked him into the ground, I knew I had to tell the story. The possibility that Roman's wrestling career might be over adds tragic weight to every aspect of Fatu's account. If this hospitalization represents the end of the tribal chief's in-ring career, it means that his final years were spent in service to a company that ultimately viewed him as expendable. His loyalty, his sacrifices, his willingness to put WWE's needs above his own health, all of it meaningless to the corporate machine that consumed him. But Fatu's visit also revealed moments of clarity that suggest Roman is beginning to understand the true nature of his relationship with WWE. He talked about AEW, Fatu admitted, dropping perhaps the biggest bombshell of his entire interview. He talked about wrestlers who left WWE and found happiness, found creative fulfillment, found companies that actually cared about them as human beings. He wondered out loud what his life might have been like if he'd had the courage to walk away. This revelation will send shockwaves through the wrestling industry. The idea that Roman Reigns, WWE's hand-picked champion and company man, might be reconsidering his loyalty to the organization represents a seismic shift in power dynamics. If Roman is genuinely entertaining thoughts about life outside WWE, it suggests that his hospitalization might be a turning point not just medically, but professionally. He asked me what I thought about wrestlers who prioritized their happiness over their paychecks, Fatu continued. He wanted to know if I thought it was possible to find success and satisfaction outside of WWE's system. These weren't casual questions, these were the thoughts of a man re-evaluating everything he's built his life around. The timing of these conversations, occurring while Roman was isolated and vulnerable in a hospital bed, adds poignancy to their potential significance. Stripped of the corporate spin, the fan adulation, and the financial rewards, Roman appears to be grappling with fundamental questions about what really matters in life and career. Fatu's account also revealed the extent to which Roman has been isolated within WWE's corporate structure. He told me he doesn't have real friends in the company anymore, Fatu explained. Everyone who talks to him wants something: storyline changes, championship opportunities, political favor. He can't tell who actually cares about him as a person versus who's just trying to advance their own careers. This isolation explains why Roman's hospitalization resulted in such complete abandonment. The relationships he thought were based on genuine connection were apparently nothing more than professional networking disguised as friendship. When he could no longer provide career benefits to others, they simply disappeared. The loneliness was the worst part, Fatu continued. Worse than the physical pain, worse than the fear about his future, the realization that he'd spent years building relationships that turned out to be completely hollow. He kept asking me if I thought anyone would visit, if anyone would check on him, and I didn't have the heart to tell him that I was probably it. The psychological impact of this realization cannot be overstated. Roman has spent his entire adult life within WWE's system, building his identity around being the tribal chief, the leader of the Bloodline, the company's chosen champion. To discover that these roles provided no genuine human connection must have been devastating. But perhaps the most damaging revelation concerns WWE's public relations strategy regarding Roman's condition. According to Fatu, company officials have been deliberately downplaying the severity of Roman's health issues to protect their WrestlePalooza 2025 ticket sales and television ratings. They're lying to everyone, Fatu stated bluntly. To the fans, to the investors, to the media, everyone. They know Roman might not be cleared to wrestle for months, maybe ever, but they're still selling tickets and advertising matches based on his participation. It's fraud, plain and simple. If true, this represents one of the most serious ethical violations in WWE's corporate history. The company would be essentially running a con game on their customers, selling a product they know they cannot deliver while putting their injured performer's health at further risk through public pressure to return before he's ready. They had marketing meetings in the hospital, Fatu revealed, his disgust evident. While Roman was lying there in pain, WWE executives were in the hallway discussing how to spin his condition to minimize negative publicity. They were more concerned about their brand image than his actual well-being. This callous prioritization of corporate interests over human welfare represents everything wrong with WWE's current leadership. The image of executives conducting damage control meetings within earshot of their injured star's hospital room is almost cartoonishly evil, yet entirely consistent with the company's track record of treating performers as expendable assets. Fatu's revelations also extend to the broader culture within WWE's locker room, where Roman's hospitalization has apparently been met with calculated indifference rather than genuine concern. Guys are already positioning themselves to take his spot, Fatu explained. Before the doctors had even finished their initial examination, wrestlers were texting their agents, calling their contacts, trying to figure out how Roman's absence might benefit their careers. This opportunistic response from Roman's colleagues provides further evidence of the hollow relationships that define WWE's corporate culture. Rather than rallying around an injured peer, the roster apparently sees his misfortune as a career opportunity, demonstrating the cutthroat mentality that WWE has cultivated within its talent pool. Nobody asked how he was doing, Fatu continued. Nobody offered to help, to visit, to do anything that might actually support him as a human being. They were all too busy calculating how his injury might affect their own storylines, their own championship opportunities, their own positions in the company hierarchy. The contrast between this calculated self-interest and the genuine concern that Fatu demonstrated through his hospital visit is striking. While other wrestlers were focused on career advancement, Fatu was focused on his cousin's humanity, providing the kind of support that should have come from the entire Bloodline family. But Fatu's account also revealed moments of hope within this bleak narrative. During their 6-hour conversation, Roman apparently experienced moments of clarity about what he truly values and what kind of legacy he wants to leave behind. He talked about his real family, Fatu shared. His wife, his kids, the people who love him regardless of championship belts or corporate approval. He realized that he'd been so focused on being the tribal chief that he'd forgotten how to just be Roman. This personal awakening, occurring during Roman's most vulnerable moment, suggests that his hospitalization might ultimately prove beneficial if it helps him refocus his priorities around genuine relationships and personal fulfillment rather than corporate success. He made me promise something, Fatu revealed, his voice heavy with the weight of the commitment. He made me promise that if something happened to him, if his condition got worse or if WWE tried to cover up what really happened, I would tell the truth. He said the wrestling business had taken enough from him, it wasn't going to take his voice too. This deathbed-style promise adds dramatic weight to Fatu's decision to speak publicly about Roman's condition. He's not just sharing gossip or seeking attention, he's fulfilling a sacred commitment to his cousin, honoring a request made during what might have been Roman's darkest hour. The implications of Fatu's revelations extend far beyond Roman's individual situation. They provide a window into WWE's corporate culture that should terrify every performer currently working for the company. If this is how they treat their biggest star, their most valuable asset, their hand-picked champion, what hope do lesser performers have for genuine care and support? This could be any of us, Fatu warned. Every wrestler in that company should be paying attention to how WWE is handling Roman's situation, because it shows you exactly how much they really care about the people who make them rich. You're valuable to them right up until you're not, and then you're completely disposable. This warning serves as a wake-up call for wrestlers who might be prioritizing corporate loyalty over self-preservation. Fatu's account demonstrates that WWE's promises of family and loyalty are conditional at best and completely meaningless when performers can no longer generate revenue. The wrestling industry's reaction to Fatu's revelations has been swift and polarized. WWE supporters have dismissed his claims as attempts to generate publicity for himself at Roman's expense, while critics of the company have embraced his account as validation of their long-standing concerns about WWE's treatment of performers. But regardless of how different factions interpret Fatu's words, the emotional authenticity of his account is difficult to dismiss. The specific details, the raw emotion, the personal risk he's taking by speaking out, all of it suggests that he's telling the truth about what he witnessed in that hospital room. I know people will say I'm lying, that I'm trying to damage WWE or hurt Roman's career, Fatu acknowledged. But I was there. I saw him broken and alone and abandoned by everyone he thought he could count on. I held his hand while he cried about wasting years of his life serving a company that didn't give a damn about him as a human being. The image of Jacob Fatu holding Roman Reigns' hand while he cried about his wasted loyalty to WWE is perhaps the most powerful and heartbreaking moment in his entire account. It humanizes both men in a way that transcends wrestling storylines and corporate politics, reminding us that behind the characters and the championships are real people with real emotions and real vulnerabilities. As WrestlePalooza 2025 approaches and WWE scrambles to restructure their biggest event around Roman's uncertain status, Fatu's revelations cast a shadow over everything the company is trying to accomplish. How can fans invest emotionally in storylines when they know the performers are being exploited behind the scenes? How can we celebrate WWE's success when it comes at such a devastating human cost? I want people to remember Roman is more than just the tribal chief, Fatu concluded, his voice filled with both sadness and determination. I want them to remember him as a man who gave everything to this business and got abandoned when he needed support most. And I want his story to serve as a warning to every wrestler who thinks WWE loyalty is worth sacrificing their health, their happiness, or their humanity. The wrestling world will be watching closely to see how WWE responds to Fatu's explosive revelations. Will they dismiss his claims, attack his credibility, or acknowledge the serious issues he's raised about their treatment of performers? Will Roman's condition improve enough for him to compete at WrestlePalooza, or will his career end in the sterile loneliness of a hospital room? What's certain is that Jacob Fatu's courageous decision to speak truth to power has changed the conversation around WWE's corporate culture and their treatment of the performers who make them billions of dollars. His account serves as both an indictment of the current system and a call for change that prioritizes human dignity over corporate profits. The Bloodline may have abandoned Roman Reigns in his darkest hour, but Jacob Fatu's loyalty proves that real family, the kind based on love rather than storylines, still exists in professional wrestling. His willingness to risk everything to tell Roman's story demonstrates the kind of courage and integrity that WWE's corporate culture seems designed to destroy. Wrestling fans, the choice is clear. We can continue to support a system that treats performers as disposable assets, or we can demand better. We can accept WWE's corporate spin about family and loyalty, or we can listen to the truth that Jacob Fatu risked everything to tell us. Roman Reigns deserved better than to be abandoned in that hospital room. Every wrestler deserves better than to be discarded when they can no longer generate profit. The question is, will we demand that better treatment, or will we continue to enable a system that values championships over humanity? The answer will determine not just Roman's legacy, but the future of professional wrestling itself.